Weather. It's like terrain, but in the sky. Since the beginning of competitive Pokemon and the VGC circuit, weather, all four kinds, have been a powerful thing for you to build your competitive teams around. Let's look at the most consistently powerful weather, rain, and break down how the teams built around it have changed, and in some ways stayed the same throughout competitive Pokemon. First, what exactly does rain do? Besides get you soaked, I mean. Rain only has two effects by itself. It decreases the power of fire-type attacks by 50%, and increases the power of water-type attacks by 50%. Makes sense, right? There's a lot of synergies with rain that we'll talk about as they come up. Little tricks and combos that make a light drizzle into a devastating downpour. The first few years of VGC are pretty poorly documented, so a huge thanks to Gavin Michaels for telling me about the early days. Make sure to follow him on Twitter. With the table setting out of the way, let's get into it. Our story begins in Generation 4, before VGC was really VGC. Rain was dominant. Take a look at the third place team from the 2008 VGS. Ludicolo, Vaporeon, Kingdra, and Slowking. Ludicolo and Kingdra have access to an ability that we'll be talking about a lot in this video, Swift Swim. Swift Swim doubles your speed while in the rain, so for Ludicolo and Kingdra, rain doubles their speed and buffs their stab water-type attacks. A pretty obviously powerful combo. But how do we get rain up? We're a few years off from getting rain for free. Back then, you had to work for it. The rain player would lead Ludicolo and a Pokemon with Rain Dance, then use Fake Out with Ludicolo to make sure its partner got Rain Dance off safely. Kind of like the Fake Out Trick Room stuff you see today, but wetter, I guess. From there, the rain player would spam their boosted water-type attacks and overwhelm their opponent with offense. In 2009, we saw a lot more of Rain's dominance. All but one of the top 4 of that year's Worlds were packing Ludicolo. But here, we start to notice Rain evolving. Take a look at the third place team. Notice that Scizor? Scizor only has one weakness: fire. But if it's in rain, Scizor can survive extremely devastating fire-type moves, like Fire Blast from Salamence. No longer was rain only being used offensively, but defensively as well. But like any arms race, as rain improved, so did its counters. First place in 2009 had a Dry Skin Toxicroak. Dry Skin makes Toxicroak immune to water-type moves, healing 25% of its HP instead of taking damage. If your whole game plan is to spam water-type attacks, Toxicroak makes you think twice. Alternative weather setters like Hippowdon and Abomasnow also started to crop up, giving players a way to override rain after their opponent set it up. Hey, before we get to the rest of the video, if you like what we're doing here, please subscribe or follow. Stuff like this takes a lot of work, and the team really appreciates knowing you guys enjoy what we're making. Let's get back to it. In 2010, we had our first format in VGC where restricteds, extremely powerful legendaries, were allowed. So let me introduce you to one of the rain friends we'll be seeing a lot of: Kyogre. Thanks to its then exclusive ability Drizzle, Kyogre would set up rain when it switched in, permanently. If your opponent wanted rain gone, they had to override it with another weather or some other ability. Kyogre dominated 2010 Worlds. Ray Rizzo won the whole thing with Kyogre plus Swift Swim Ludicolo, a combination over half the top 8 brought with them. In 2011, we moved to Generation 5, and rain was the weakest it has ever been. The VGC format that year only allowed a very few Pokemon, none of which enabled rain well. But in 2012, rain was back with an absolute vengeance. With the advent of hidden abilities, Politoed get access to Drizzle, turning it into Discount Kyogre. This time around, your rain abusers were one of Ludicolo or Kingdra, and one of Metagross or Scizor. Rain teams were becoming a lot less committal, and often had a non-raid mode to go with it. For example, Cresselia Trick Room option. Rain was a dominant force throughout the 2012 season and warped the entire metagame around it. But because of that, people were ready for it, and only one player, Matthew Coyle, made top 8 of Worlds with it that year. In 2013, people realized Thundurus, Tyranitar, and Amoonguss were among the best Pokemon available in the format, all of which were very hostile towards Politoed and his friends. Despite the hostility, there were still 3 Rain players in the top 32 of Worlds. Notably, the 10th place Rain user, Yuki Matsumoto, did not have a Swift Swim Pokemon. Instead, his second water type was Jellicent, a Pokemon that could do a pretty good Kyogre impression with rain-boosted water spouts. When we got to Generation 6, weather set by abilities were no longer permanent. Instead, they had the same 5-turn limit as weather set by moves, but that didn't slow rain down one bit. In 2014, there were 2 rain teams in the top 8 of World. Lee Provost used rain to enable Ludicolo, and to protect arguably the best Pokemon in the format, Mega Mawile, from what would otherwise be terrifying fire-type attacks. And Dane O'Mara used it to support Lapras and protect his own Steel-type Mega Pokemon, Mega Lucario. Notably, O'Mara also had a Raichu on his team. Raichu's ability, Lightning Rod, is a great way to protect your water types from electric moves. Another reoccurring piece of tech we'll see as we go forward. The next year, Thundurus was once again back in the format, and its Prankster Thunderwaves countered Rain's Swift Swim users almost on its own. The harsh metagame stopped any Rain players from top 8ing Worlds that year, but Tolar Webb still managed to win US Nationals with Politoed and friends, showing that even when it wasn't super well positioned, the raw power of Rain could win out. In 2016, Rain was the only thing that stood in the way of what was the most oppressive team to ever exist, Xerneas Groudon. There isn't a single SwiftSwim user in the top cut of 2016 Worlds, but that's because the format was completely dominated by the weather war between Primal Kyogre and Primal Groudon. So you just couldn't guarantee consistent weather. So instead of using weather to support your team, the Kyogre teams were built around making sure it was as difficult as possible for your opponent to have the weather they wanted. Look at Wolf Glick's World's winning team. He had a Bronzong with Skill Swap. But why? Skill Swap makes two Pokemon swap abilities, and for abilities that activate when a Pokemon is sent out, those abilities then immediately activate again. This allowed Wolf to simultaneously give his Kyogre Levitate, so Kyogre would be immune to Groudon's ground-type attacks, and to reset the weather as he needed. Every Kyogre team in top 8 had access to this trick. Wolf's team also had a Lightning Rod Raichu, for the reasons we pointed out in 2014. 2017 brought us into Sun and Moon, and with the new generation, Game Freak decided to give Pelipper Drizzle, completing our trio of Rain setters. Pelipper was more frail than Politoed, but packed a little bit more of a punch, and had access to the powerful Tailwind, which one reigned supreme. Well, for the majority of 2017, the premier Rain team was called the Double Duck, a team that utilized a SwiftSwim Pokemon we haven't talked about yet, Golduck. The core of the team was more of the same. Get off extremely powerful Water-type attacks with SwiftSwim. In this case, ridiculously powerful Water-type Z moves. By the end of the 2017 season, Politoed proved that sometimes newer isn't better, being the Drizzle Pokemon of choice for Sebastian Escalante's World's top 8 team. 2018 was a weird year for Rain. While Politoed did appear on Emilio Forbes' second place Worlds team, its ability to set up Rain was secondary to its purpose as a bulky Perish Song Pokemon, with Drizzle only being used to protect his Tapu Bulu from fire-type attacks and to boost Politoed's own Scald. A Double Duck team reminiscent of what we saw in 2017 did top 8 EUIC, but that's where the Drizzle Gang's accomplishments end. 2019 was another restricted format, meaning it was time for Kyogre to push Pelipper and Politoed to the side and show them how it's done. Just like 2016, Kyogre and Groudon meant there was an intense weather war going on, so there were no SwiftSwim users to be seen. James Beck took top 4 at Worlds that year with a Kyogre Xerneas team. Notably, James was running a Prankster Tailwind Tornadus to help make sure Kyogre could get off fast, powerful water spouts. Remember that Tailwind Tornadus. Help me back. Finally, we get to 2020, the beginning of the Sword and Shield era. Because of the pandemic, there was only one World Championship, so the first few years will be a little broad stroke. During 2020, before the circuit shut down, Rain had a little success, with a Ludicolo Pelipper team coming in 3rd place at the Bochum Regional Championships. During Players' Cup 2, an official online event, Juan Nar took 4th place with Politoed and Kingdra. Kingdra became the SwiftSwim user of choice for one reason: Max Airstream. Dynamax moves were extremely powerful and had a variety of bonus effects beyond damage. Max Airstream boosted both of your Pokemon's speed by 1 stage. This allowed Kingdra to deal huge damage and simultaneously make sure it and its partner were moving first. Sword and Shield changed formats more quickly than previous games, and by early 2021, Kyogre was regal, so of course, Rain was strong. Remember how I said to pay attention to Tornadus? Well, he's back with a vengeance. Same idea as before, Tailwind for insanely quick, insanely devastating water-type attacks. Kyogre quickly won Players' Cup 3, and Santino won the Players' Cup 25th Anniversary Invitational, adding the insanely powerful Urshifu Rapid Strike to his team. A new Pokemon that, while it didn't have SwiftSwim, certainly enjoyed the boost Rain gave to its Surging Strikes attack. In early 2022, Marco Silva won the February International Challenge with a Kyogre team featuring a new SwiftSwim user from Generation 8, Barrascuda. This guy hit hard and was insanely fast, even outside of Rain. Importantly, Barrascuda had access to Max Airstream, so it could make sure its other teammates also went fast. Kyogre also had a new best friend, Zacian. Zacian was easily the most powerful Pokemon in the game, so naturally protecting it from one of its few weaknesses was just a match made in heaven. Later in 2022, we saw the return of live events, and Kyogre was everywhere. SwiftSwim users like Seismitoad and Kingdra showed up occasionally. Because of the weather war we always see in restricted formats, they weren't too common. As such, Rain was often used to boost Kyogre's attack and to protect powerful Pokemon like Rillaboom and Zacian from their fire weaknesses. At Worlds that year, we saw 2 Kyogres in top 8, one piloted by James Beck and one piloted by Megan Rattle. Both Kyogres were paired with Zacian, but while James's team wanted to go fast with Tailwind Tornadus, Megan instead chose to support her Kyogre with Grimmsnarl, disrupting her opponents with Thunder Wave and bolstering her team's defenses with Light Screen and Reflect. Finally, we reached the current 2022-2023 season. and the current generation of Pokemon. Rain had a huge showing at the first regional of Scarlet and Violet, with two very different Rain teams making top 4. Aaron Brock had a Rain/Trick Room team using the Generation 8 Swift Swim Pokemon Dreadnought. While this strategy has popped up from time to time since, this is really its only major performance to date. Jody Azzarelli's team combined Rain with Tailwind, and paired Pelipper with Palafin, a new Pokemon from Generation 9 that has an extremely high attack stat, and a great signature move, Jet Punch, a high-power, priority water-type attack. Jody combined Palafin's naturally high attack, the new terrestrialization mechanic, and Rain to boost Palafin's water-type attacks to ridiculous heights. Jody's team also featured 2 new broken steel types for Rain to protect: Golden Go, an extremely powerful special attacker that's immune to status moves, and King Gambit, a bulky Pokemon that disincentivized Jody's opponents from intimidating his Palafin with Defiant. It's also worth noting that Jody's Pelipper was holding a Damp Rock, an item that increases the length of Rain from 5 turns to 8. The next few regionals would be devoid of Rain in top 8, and with the introduction of Paradox Pokemon, it looked like Sun may be the new weather of choice. Until, in February of 2023, Gavin Michaels won the Oceania International Champion with a Palafin Rain team that utilized the powerful new Paradox Pokemon, Iron Hands, to pivot his Pokemon into perfect position for whatever scenario he found himself in. The next month, at the Vancouver Regional, Gavin top cut with Rain again, this time using Azumarill over Palafin, an innovation thought up by the well-known Marill enthusiast Elisa, better known as Miss Salami. The theory being that, unlike Palafin, who needed to switch out to activate its ability before dealing a lot of damage, Azumarill could do huge damage without any setup. Finally, we've caught up to the modern day. At time of writing, the last 2 regionals, Hartford and Malmo, had Rain in 2nd and 1st respectively, one with Palafin and the other with Azumarill. So, that's the story so far. Rain has been winning tournaments since 2008, and almost 15 years later, it doesn't show any signs of stopping. This video took a more historic look at VGC than the more time-sensitive commentary I usually offer, so I wanted to know what you think of this new style. As always, thanks, and I hope you enjoyed.